There are many attractions in Virginia Beach for both visitors and our residents. Naturally, the biggest attraction is our beaches, not only those here along the Atlantic, but on the shores of the Chesapeake Bay as well. The water offers many recreational opportunities for our enjoyment, but it is also home to a wide variety of marine animals that can pose certain health risks. Some you may be familiar with, others you may never have heard of at all. But all of the marine creatures you're about to see in this video can be found in the water off Virginia Beach. Hi, I'm Art Kahn with the Virginia Beach Fire Department. We produced this video because we care about the health and well-being of both our visitors and our citizens.
My name's Herbert Austin. I'm a retired professor emeritus from the College of William and Mary, Virginia Institute of Marine Science. I was there for 30 years. Prior to that, I worked for several years with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. My background in marine science is primarily here in the Chesapeake Bay area. My interest has been in how changes in the weather, changes in the climate affect the distribution and abundance of fish in this area. Virginia Beach is a particularly unique area because it sits at the mouth of the bay where we have low salinity waters coming down the bay and meeting high salinity waters of the ocean. Depending on weather patterns, Virginia Beach can be sitting in low salinity water or that could be cool, and the other possibility then with the wind from the southeast, you would have high salinity waters that are warm water coming off of the Gulf Stream and into the mouth of the bay. So on any given day, depending on the wind patterns, the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, specifically Virginia Beach, may be in an area that's warm and salty or cold and low salinity, which means that the species of animals, particularly in this case the dangerous marine animals, will be different from day to day. In this area, and what I'll do is run through these different types of animals and plants by their position in the food chain, if you will. So the next slide shows the red tide, and truly in the upper picture it is red. It's tides like this that give the Red Sea its name, the red tide, and it caused animals in the sea to die, caused people who were in and around the water to get sick, and that's a pretty dramatic red tide in this picture. In the lower right corner you see brown water, and that's more of what we get here in the Chesapeake Bay in the late summer. While it's not dangerous in and of itself, but people who might have some sensitivities to things like this could have a reaction and would break out. There's really not much you can do to prevent it, except maybe not go in the water. And most people who would have a problem with this have probably experienced something like this in the past. Anyhow, now we'll move up the food chain a bit. The next one is a sand flea in the upper left-hand corner inserted. And the bare foot of this individual has sand flea bites on it. And the sand flea is almost like a seagoing chigger in that it bites you at a reproductive time, and the fleas are bigger than chiggers. They don't always insert themselves, but there have been cases where reproducing sand fleas have gotten up under the skin. And you can't really prevent it except to stay out of the water when these fleas are active. And you would treat it the same as chigger bites. Don't scratch it till it bleeds. Particularly you can use something like a hydrocortisone or Benadryl to put on it to prevent the swelling. The next picture, which looks like something out of the movie Nemo, little circles, those are all a small jellyfish. And the larvae of this jellyfish on the next slide, a series of pink dots across the person's abdomen. These are actually bites from the larvae of the jellyfish, but people refer to these as sea lice. But they're not actually lice, they're not crustaceans, they're jellyfish. These white jellyfish are sea nettles. It's kind of an interesting animal in that its reproductive products are up in the freshwater area of the rivers. And in the spring, the eggs hatch and the larvae come down the river and become the jellyfish that we see at the first part of the summer. After they have a chance to reproduce, and because of the particular current patterns in the bay, their reproductive products are carried back upriver and settle out on the bottom. And the adult jellyfish, once they've reproduced, then tend to die off as the water gets warmer. And so they're an early season problem, but not later in the summer. Next picture is the lion's mane jellyfish. This is an oceanic species, and it comes in if we have prolonged southeast winds, warmer than usual Gulf Stream water coming in, and in comes the lion mane jellyfish, which has a pretty severe sting. Now, with the sea nettle and the lion's mane jellyfish, in both cases, a lot of your reaction depends upon your own sensitivities, your own allergies even, to this type of a sting. Now we have the Portuguese Man-of-War. You see this gentleman got stung across the chest, and there's a second picture here also of a really severe reaction that somebody had to a Portuguese Man-of-War sting. Portuguese Man-of-War, when you see it, it's normally either a purple bubble floating on the surface, but it has 6 feet of tentacles hanging down. And so if you get near it, depending on the wind and current, you may get stung even though you're 3 or 4 feet away from the bubble. And then it ends up on the beach, which is quite beautiful, and people get stung though by picking it up to look at it, and then the wind blows the tentacles up against their body. So as I was saying about the stings, it's the kind of thing where it depends on your reactivity to this type of a sting. And there are more old wives' tales on what to do with jellyfish and Portuguese Man-of-War stings than probably anything else. The main thing is, though, don't put any fresh water on it. Some people want to try and wash it right away. Fresh water will cause the undischarged nematocysts. The nematocyst is the cell that has the little harpoon inside with the poison or venom, and not all of them discharge when you get stuck with them. And so you see the photograph of the gentleman with the red cross areas on his chest. There are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of non-discharged, waiting for their turn, nematocysts, and so fresh water will cause them to expand and discharge. The best thing to put on right away would be alcohol, because it fixes the tissue and it won't be able to discharge anymore. And then in the long term, what you do about it kind of would depend on your own doctor. If you're a person that reacts to bee stings and other type of stings, you might want to notify your doctor right away. Now we'll move from the invertebrates to the vertebrates in the bay. The first fish that we have is the catfish. And catfish in the bay, particularly say the blue catfish, lives up in fresh water, but they come down, and particularly if we've had a lot of river discharge, blue catfish will come all the way down to Virginia Beach. And you can see the picture of the catfish here. The pectoral spines, the fins by the gills, is where the pectoral spine is located. And so it's very possible, particularly somebody who's fishing and handling these fish, to get a spine. And the spines shouldn't be pulled out because they don't have a smooth surface. And if you get one up in there, it stays and it hooks into the flesh, into your tendons. And in the picture here with the foot, it's up in there, and it can only be removed surgically. You don't want to try and cut this out yourself. And also, if you put ice on it, then just and transport it to the doctor. We also have in the bay the toadfish, and it has venomous spines along its dorsal fin. It's generally not as bad as others, but still, if you have an allergic reaction to venoms, this is something you should be very careful of. People don't usually step on them because they'll swim away. People catch them on hook and line when they're trying to catch something else, and then in handling it, unhooking it, they end up getting the spines in their hands. Next fish we have here is in the shark skates and rays. This is a picture of a cow-nose ray. And the cow-nose ray was not much of a problem back up until the mid-'80s. And then suddenly there were great invasions of cow-nose rays. Thing to notice in these two pictures here is that they come right up onto the beach. And so a small child playing in the water by the beach might try to grab one and would get stuck. Nowadays, cow-nose rays show up in the late spring, early summer in schools of sometimes over 1 million rays. And the picture here is a school of individual cow-nose rays. Cow-nose ray will sting you if you grab a hold of it. You're not going to step on one. But if you catch one on hook and line, when you're unhooking it, it could very well stick its spine in you. The main one to watch out for is this flat southern ray, and it normally lies on the sandy bottom, and it will wiggle around and actually bury in so that you don't see anything except its eyes sticking out. And you can see the spine. It's not something that you want. And although a lot of people actually try to get them because they get pretty big on the bigger rays, and people like to use them as letter openers and just souvenirs. And so you have to, of course, be careful. The picture there of the spine and the foot is where somebody probably stepped on one. If you're in a sandy area and if you shuffle your feet as you walk, it'll disturb the ray and it'll swim away. They will not attack you. The interesting thing about the ray is it does have venom in it, in its spine, and they say that it's better not to put ice on it, but to put a hot pack, which will work better. It deactivates the venom, but nevertheless, you're going to need it removed surgically, one way or the other. The other thing to consider, and as somebody walking on the beach or even fishing along Virginia's shores, you're not likely to run into the lionfish. It's a very beautiful fish, and it's one of the fish people like to have in an aquarium. But in the last few years, with the ocean being warmer, lionfish, which don't live over sandy bottoms but live in the coral reefs or around artificial structures, say like a sunken ship, the lionfish can be there. The ecological problem with the lionfish is that they're voracious eaters, and they feed on the juveniles of the fish that we want. And when you get several lionfish in an area, the other fish begin to disappear. From our perspective, if you catch or spear a lionfish, you have to be very careful in handling it, because its fins contain the spines in its fins contain a very toxic venom. And people have been killed, particularly in the Pacific, where they're a lot more common and they get larger. So if you do run into one, if you're out on a recreational dive on an artificial reef, leave them alone. If you get stung by a lionfish, I mean, you have to treat it as a severe venomous attack. You've had poison injected into your system, and you should probably seek medical help right away. Now we'll move to the sharks. They're the ones that everybody thinks of as the most dangerous animals out there. Here in the Chesapeake Bay area, there are 2 or 3 that are very common. Inshore and close to the beach, the sand shark, also known as the ragged tooth shark, probably is responsible for more shark bites than any of the others, mainly because people handle them all the time. They catch them and they handle them. The shark doesn't normally bite somebody unprovoked. The picture of the close-up of the face, you can see the shape of the teeth. It's called a snaggletooth shark also, in addition to a ragged tooth. And it does bite a lot of people, but as I said, it's not normally something where they're coming after anybody. Another dangerous shark is the tiger shark, and the tiger shark is a more tropical species, probably common south of Cape Hatteras. When we have the right wind patterns that bring warm southeast waters from the Gulf Stream and the coast up this way, then we start getting tiger sharks. And they are an aggressive shark. The most common shark in this area, and the one responsible for most bites, is the Dusky Shark. Interesting thing about the Dusky Shark is it can live and reproduce in fresh water. In fact, for years there was one called the Lake Nicaragua shark, which was a freshwater shark living in Lake Nicaragua, which is a landlocked lake. It was found later genetically that this shark was actually the Dusky Shark. Here in the bay, Dusky Sharks have been found up to Washington, D.C. They've been found up to the falls at Fredericksburg, in the York River up into the Mattaponi and the Pamunkey, and they've been found in the James River up almost to the fall line. So they're anywhere in the bay, and most of the time in bay waters it's murky, and so they take exploratory bites. They're not attacking somebody the way white sharks are reported to do, but they do stand out there as one of the most common bites. The handling of the shark, two ways. One is, handling being around the sharks is to be quiet. And if you see evidence of sharks, you want to get back to shore quietly. Running towards shore as fast as you can stirs up the water and may excite the shark and bring it over to explore what's going on. When you do get bitten, it's essentially one of two forms of damage. One, it's a puncture wound. A lot of times the shark bites and lets go, and now you have 20 or 30 puncture wounds in a semicircle on your leg or your side. Or they take a pretty good bite, but they don't take the foot off or the leg off most of the time, and then you end up with a traumatic laceration. In this final picture here showing the person lying down on the beach, this is the lady that was bitten on the Outer Banks. And interestingly enough, there's a fishing pier right behind her, and if you swim, I would recommend you don't swim around fishing piers because fish are attracted to piers. In fact, piers are considered like an artificial reef that attracts the fish, and that certainly then attracts the sharks. And so that's probably what happened here. The sharks were attracted more to food in the form of fish than human beings. Sharks have a kind of a dual activity period around sunrise and around dusk. A lot of animals are the same way. They become active and feed at sunrise and at sunset. And I would not recommend, although I know people like to do it, to go for the sunset swim. And sharks will come right up close to the beach after the sun sets, and so there are bites or are attacks that people have experienced in the middle of the night in water that was knee deep or waist deep along a beach. If sharks live there at any time of the year, after dark or when the water is murky, the sharks are more likely to be in closer to the beach, and they're more likely to try an exploratory bite. One thing to keep in mind about shark attacks is that it's very rare. And if you look at the number of people that go to the beach and the number of people that are bitten, statistically they say you have a better chance of being struck by lightning than attacked by a shark. Shark attacks get a lot of publicity when it happens, particularly along tourist beaches. And so if you're somebody that's from the Midwest and you want to go in the water, don't go by yourself, and don't go at night. And the worst time to go is at dusk, just as it's getting dark, and just as the sun is rising, because that's the time the sharks are most active. One of the reasons why people like to fish, surf fishermen, sunrise and sunset, is because the fish that you're after are the same fish the sharks are after. And so you're likely to end up running into one. Okay, and finishing up, I'm Herb Austin. I'm a professor emeritus at the College of William and Mary, Virginia Institute of Marine Science. And I hope what we've given you today will be helpful, that you won't get hurt in the ocean, and if you do, you have some idea as to the severity of the situation and can do something about it. Main thing is always prevention. It's their home that you're wading in or swimming in or fishing in, so you have to keep that in mind.